This video will walk you through creating a histogram based on the frequency distribution using Excel. We're using the data file returns2, and this contains data on the 1-year returns on both load and no load funds. They're divided first into the load fund or the no load fund. So here the first two columns, A and B, contain the name and the annual 1-year return in percentage notation. So 0.9 is 0.9%, or negative 14.4 is negative 14.4%. So we have the no load funds followed by the load funds. And you can see here there's more load funds than no load funds. Now to make the histogram, I don't want to divide these into the load and no load funds. So what I'm going to do is to create a combined list of these. So combine is the combined list of just the names, and then combine return will be, the list of the return. So the first thing I'm doing is copying over the combined names, and I'm going to just simply paste them in here. Now there I did it using right-clicking. I can also use Control-C and Control-V. So I will now go in and put in or highlight the no load or the load fund names. All of those. And I'll use Control-C here and Control-V to paste. Okay, now I need my returns. So I'm highlighting all of my no load returns, Control-C and Control-V over here. And my load fund returns, I'm doing the same there as well. Control-C and over here, Control-V. Okay. Now I want that column just to look a little bit neater, so I'm going to widen it just by double-clicking on the column at the very top. Next, I need to follow along with my steps. So to create my frequency distribution, I need to know the number of bins. In order to do that, I need to know the number of observations. I also need to know the width of each bin, which will require me to discover the highest and lowest observation in my data set. So what I'm going to do over here, number of observations. Okay. And again, I'll just make that column the right size. So I need the number of observations. I also need the minimum observation, the maximum observation, so that's for my high and low. Then I will need the number of bins and the bin width. Okay. Now this was set default to bold all of my, my first row, so I can just go through here if I'd like to unbold that or re-click the bold if I wanted all of that bolded. It's not really a big deal. So to find the number of observations, sorry about that. To find the number of observations, I'll use the count function, equals count. And then I'll go and highlight all of the data in my combined return, all of the return data, but not including the label. So that gave me a count of 83. To find the minimum observation equals min, and highlight again all of the data in the combined return column, but not the label combined return. Do the same for the max, equals max. Highlight that data. Now, the number of bins is equal to the square root of the number of observations. So SQRT tells the computer to take the square root, and then square root of number of observations, we already calculated that as 83, so I'm just going to click on that cell. Now that tells me 11.99. I could round in my head, or I could have Excel do that for me by just saying I require that value to be an integer. So in order to tell Excel to do an integer, you hit INT, and then I'll need to put all of that in parentheses. And all that basically does is round to the nearest whole number. Then for the bin width, we have the formula in our PowerPoint slides. The bin width is max minus min, or high minus low, divided by the number of bins. So equals, I'm putting parentheses around my numerator, max minus min divided by the number of bins. And again, here I have a rounding situation, so what I can do again is use my integer function. And remember to put parentheses around the entire thing. So that tells me I will have a bin width of 15. So I will have 9 groupings of returns, and each grouping will contain 15 returns, starting from negative 41.9 all the way up to 97.5%. So to create my histogram, I'll go into Insert, Pivot Table. Now I'm going to select my data. So table or range, I'll select my combined data, including this time the label. And I want to put this on in an existing location. So I'll just scroll up to any open cell here. I'll put this right there at L1. Click OK. All right, so now that brings up my pivot table field list. I can either drag my combined return into columns or rows. I'm going to drag it into rows. It's personal preference. It really doesn't matter. I'd just rather have a vertical table than a long horizontal table. You can do whatever you want. And I will also drag that over here into values. Now, it default says sum. I want to change that sum to count. So I'm going to click there and select value field settings and change that to count. Click OK. My next step is to group them into my appropriate bin widths. So I'm going to select any cell in the left-hand column and right-click on that. Scroll down to where it says Group. Now it says starting at, and it default uses my minimum, and ending at, and it default uses my maximum. So that's great. And then by, that's asking the bin width. The default is 10, but I want bin widths of 15, so I'm going to say 15. And here it creates basically the frequency distribution for me, divided into 9 bins with a width of 15 observations per bin. So I will highlight that information, just the returns and the number of observations within that return grouping, not the total overall. And I can create a histogram by going to Insert, selecting Column Charts, select the first one on there. Now this creates a chart that isn't actually a histogram. So what I need to do is change the chart layout, and I will select the one that looks clumpy, which is chart layout number 8. And there I have created a histogram.